for our next technical session, I warmly welcome Arpan and Ed. Please join us. Thank you. Thank you.
Right up first. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I know we are both very excited to invite all of the various different developers, merchants, partners that we have to talk all about Fastlane, but beyond Fastlane, to also talk about some of our online payment fundamentals using the other tools that PayPal offers, PayPal and Braintree. So my name is Ed Syak. I'm an engineer here at PayPal. This is my colleague, Arpan. He's a product manager. We both work on the various different merchant integrations. So the merchant integrations are all of the tools, the SDKs, the APIs, the different platforms that you use to integrate all of the different products that PayPal offers. For today's session, we wanted to go through and dig a little bit into the technical deep dive of our online payments. And I think we'll dig into a little bit of the agenda here. But we obviously offer a lot of functionality at PayPal and Braintree. I think it's important for us to start a little bit with some of our fundamentals of processing credit cards, because I think that that sets the foundation of how we talk about all of the different payment instruments that we support. And so with that, we'll also dig into the life cycle of a transaction. We'll talk about gateways. We'll talk about PayPal and Braintree fundamentals. And importantly, we will talk about how you can integrate with PayPal and Braintree. OK, before I go too far, I'm going to talk about a few definitions here, because I think it's important that we have a shared understanding of these different things. So over here on the left, we've got our payment methods. Payment methods are the different things that the different tools that a buyer can use to pay for items online. It might include credit cards, PayPal, or Venmo, which are the different wallets that PayPal offers. Or it might include things like local payment methods. OK, in the middle, this is a payment processor. So a payment processor is the system that allows you to, as a merchant, communicate with your bank to be able to process cards online, to be able to process different types of payment methods. And with that, we're going to throw away the term of payment processor, because the important one here is the payment gateway. PayPal and Braintree offer two different gateways. There's the PayPal Complete Payments platform, and there's the Braintree gateway. A gateway is a payment processor that offers additional functionality as well, including the ability to collect payment information online, as well as supporting multiple different payment methods. OK. So we've got that out of the way, and I could start talking more about these different terms. We're going to go into the card payment processing, and we're going to talk about the four-party model. So there's four parties that are involved in this. Many of you probably already know this. We're going to do a quick refresher, because it's always worthwhile. If you're processing a transaction online, you've got these different parties that are involved. You've got a card holder. This is your buyer that's at your merchant site. They have a credit card that they're trying to use to pay for whatever goods or services that they're purchasing. The merchant, that one is pretty self-explanatory. The card holder, that credit card is typically going to be issued by a bank. If you pull out your credit cards, it may be Citibank, it may be Chase. That is referred to as the issuing bank for that cardholder. Now, the merchant also has a similar bank that they have a relationship with. That is the acquirer bank. That's the bank that they're using for processing any of the transactions that they have. OK, so let's talk about the transactions that we have here. So again, in this situation, we've got our cardholder, our buyer. He's at a merchant site. He's looking to purchase maybe a new sofa from Burrow. And so he goes to the merchant. He enters his card information. And that transaction then is sent from the merchant to the acquirer bank, where the acquirer bank needs to determine whether or not this is a valid credit card. And so that acquirer bank needs to talk to the issuing bank. This is the cardholder's bank, to determine, is this a valid credit card, and is there enough funds available? But it can't possibly talk to each individual issuing bank directly. So that's where the card networks sort of fit in. This is going to be something like a Visa or MasterCard. I like to think of them as essentially the equivalent of like a router. Based upon the card that I have in, the credit card number, which issuing bank do I need to go to ask about this payment? So now it gets routed to the appropriate issuing bank. The issuing bank then again is looking up, is this a valid credit card? And does this cardholder have credit available to actually process this transaction? Assuming all of that is true, it returns a response. It's returning authorized in this case, goes to the acquirer bank, and then back to the merchant. The cardholder is able to purchase that item online. But that's step one in the process. That's the authorization step. Realistically, at this point, the money hasn't moved, and we may have a hold on the credit card, but it's not actually processed yet. So at that point, the next step is what is considered the capture step. This is sort of the time that the merchant says, I actually want to accept this money. It tells the acquirer bank that, yes, this transaction is valid. I would like to capture it. But still, at that point, we haven't moved the money yet. The last step in this process is the settlement step. This happens usually later in the evening or overnight. All of the different transactions that were processed during the day, they get sent from the acquirer bank to the various different issuing banks. All of the money moves. All of that complexity happens behind the scenes. So those are the three steps involved in a transaction: authorize, capture, and settle. And of course, all of this complex logic and complex coordination of all these different networks, it's not free. And so it's certainly less cost than you're probably spending on advertising. But you do still need to pay money to be able to accept these cards online. So in this situation, I'm going to create some nice round numbers. All of these are sort of made up, but they're good for illustrative purposes. The cardholder is buying a pair of shoes maybe for $100, goes to the merchant, and the merchant says it would like to capture $100, goes to the acquiring bank, goes down to the issuing bank. Now the issuer is going to keep maybe about $2 of that. Some of that money is going to potentially go back to the cardholder as a end of year 1% bonus or something. Otherwise, it gets to keep some of that money itself. The card networks are going to take maybe 50 cents off of that transaction. And then the acquirer bank is also going to keep maybe around 70 cents of that. So overall, the merchant is getting to keep then $96.80 of that transaction. The end of the month, the buyer gets a bill for that $100 from the credit card. They pay their $100 back to the issuing bank, and the whole thing sort of evens out. Now, in all of these previous slides, we were talking very specifically about credit card transactions and how we process credit cards online. But we left out a pretty important part, and I alluded to it earlier. It's the gateway. So in most of these situations, merchants are not communicating directly with the acquirer bank to ask for processing of these transactions. They're using a separate company to actually do that processing for them. So it might be a payment processor, but in our situation, it is the gateway. And a gateway does a few different things for us. So it allows us to process those transactions. It gives us the ability to collect and store that payment information securely. And it also does that facilitation of the settlement that we saw earlier. So walking through the same steps that we had, I want to talk about the important parts that the gateway provides here. So number one, maybe I'll move right over here. So number one, the buyer is submitting their card information, but they're not actually submitting that card information directly into the merchant site anymore. That card information is going into card fields or some sort of a credit card form that's available on a merchant site. This then is generally hosted by that gateway. It's a credit card field that allows the merchant to be PCI compliant. And that information then gets submitted directly to the gateway. And the gateway exchanges that card information for a one-time use token. That one-time use token is returned to the UI and then goes back to the merchant server for processing the transaction. So there's a couple benefits of this. by being able to enable a card field like this online, the card information stays completely outside of the merchant domain. The merchant does not need to be processing any of the card details themselves. All of that stays securely inside of the gateway. The gateway exchanges that for a one-time use token, which is a more secure mechanism than passing around credit card details all over the internet. And that nonce, that one-time use token, can only be used a single time. When that transaction occurs, it's thrown away. It's no longer valid anymore. So this helps to allow merchants to remain PCI compliant without having to have the burden of accepting all of that payment information online. And it helps to protect the buyer's information as well. It helps to protect the buyer's credit card details so that it's not going to be shared all over the internet. But gateways offer a lot more than just processing credit card information. They allow for communicating with a variety of different payment methods. Different payment methods include digital wallets. PayPal is our most popular digital wallet. Venmo is another digital wallet. Local payment methods are also able to be processed via these gateways. So Ideal is a good example of this. If you're a merchant that is providing a good in the Netherlands, Ideal processes about 70% of all transactions in the Netherlands. And similar goes for a variety of other countries. There's various different local payment methods that are used in those different countries. So what the gateway offers in this situation is the ability to accept any of these different payment methods and some UI functionality that allows you to more easily display that on your page, collect that information from the buyers. Gateways also provide more functionality than just processing of card information or processing transactions. I think what we talked about in some of our other sessions today is the ability to save payment methods. So if you have a shopper experience where a buyer does come back to your website frequently, it might make sense to then build out the ability for that buyer to enter in a username and a password and be able to save their payment information so they can complete checkout more quickly in the future. Or if you want to offer subscriptions, recurring billing, you'll need some way to capture that information and store it. So we allow that via something that we call the vault. You store that information in the vault. It gets saved for future use. If the credit card expiration date changes, we're able to update that automatically. So this vastly simplifies the process for buyers to be able to enter in their information, come back to a great user experience for their checkout, or to be able to subscribe for various different products online. So this is how that works. Very similar to any of our other transactions. And in this situation, the buyer is entering their card information in the same card fields that we used previously. They populate their card information. That gets sent to the gateway. And we return that same one-time use token back to the client side. So again, this first part of this is exactly the same as if you wanted to process card transactions online. That one-time use token then goes back to the merchant. And here's where the difference is. Instead of processing that transaction, the merchant's just going to vault the token, and they'll be able to use that in the future to be able to process transactions another time. They return this permanent token. The merchant can store that. They can call the vault to get the saved information as well. So a lot of functionality that we provide around vaulting. And all of this, I think, is really important functionality that's offered by the gateways. OK, so I'm a developer. I know many folks here in the audience are developers as well. And you may think, like, I would like to do this. I certainly could build my own gateway. So I wanted to take just a moment to kind of talk through, here's what you need to do to be able to build that gateway, or at least sort of a foundation of that, some of the major components that we know about. Over here on this side, we've got our SDKs and our interfaces. So here at PayPal and Braintree, these are the tools that Arpan and I work on, the web SDKs, the mobile SDKs, maybe even some server SDKs. But you're also going to need to have some functionality for a merchant to be able to administer their transactions, to be able to store that customer payment information and understand some of those pieces, as well as reporting. So those are a bunch of the different UIs that you'll have to support within this system. You're also going to need to have a variety of backend systems for this. You need that super secure vault that's there. You need APIs for vaulting, transacting. Detecting fraud is a huge piece of this. As JK had mentioned earlier, fraud continues to increase. So you need to have some tooling that's available, and you can use that from a gateway as well. And all of that is sort of the internal systems that are required here, but you also need to build out adapters for the various different payment instruments themselves. They all communicate slightly differently. So you're going to want to build out Visa, MasterCard, Amex, PayPal, Venmo, all of those different payment methods that you want to support on your site. And you need to be certified to be able to process those payments. So being able to communicate with MasterCard or Visa requires you to have EMV certification, which is Europay, MasterCard, Visa. You also need to have that increased security to be able to have PCI compliance for these things. And if all goes well, this becomes a very popular product, and you want to ensure that you're going to be able to scale and provide these services reliably. So this is where our systems come in. This is where the PayPal and Braintree platforms enable this functionality. So the PayPal and Braintree platforms, the PayPal Complete Payments platform, and the Braintree Gateway provide all of the different payment method processing that you need, which is credit cards, alternative methods, PayPal branded products. And we offer this on a variety of different channels inside of your apps, on web applications, or even in store. And we provide some additional tooling on top of this. So we provide the ability to optimize and protect your products. And we also offer you some tooling to help to grow your business. So with that, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Arpan to dig a little bit deeper into some of the different fundamentals of integrating with PayPal and Braintree.
Thanks, Ed. All right, so Ed talked to us about what typical payment gateways, the capabilities typical payment gateways would provide. And both PPCP, which is PayPal Complete Payments, and Braintree are full stack processors or gateways. Now, what that means is they support accepting multiple payment methods. They securely accept card fields. They offer vaulting services. But what distinguishes both of these platforms is really the market segments that they cater to. PPCP caters to the small to medium businesses primarily, and whereas Braintree focuses more on the needs of large enterprises. Now, payment gateway services are standard across the entire market. But the reason we're calling them platforms is because of the additional capabilities they offer over and above just accepting payments. So when it comes to small and medium businesses, at PayPal, we really think a lot about how we can help these businesses grow and be successful. And for that, we offer specific capabilities that are relevant to them, like business loans and shipping services. Because then these are things that merchants don't need to worry about, and they can focus on growing their business. Enterprise merchants, on the other hand, have different needs. They need customizability, they need flexibility, they need advanced fraud tools to prevent all the fraud that's constantly increasing. Some of the large enterprises also need the ability to transact with multiple processors and multiple gateways like Braintree and PayPal to avoid things like a vendor lock-in and to have further resiliency to their systems. Now, PayPal Pay Later is a really interesting capability, and if you see, it's listed on both. The reason it's listed on both is PayPal Pay Later is the ability for customers to pay for their order over time in installments, whereas the merchant gets paid upfront so that they can continue their business. Now, while it is supported on both platforms, this is something that really helps our small to medium businesses. In fact, we have seen small SMB retailers that have enabled pay later on their checkout flow, they've seen their average order values go up by up to 20%. Now, just by adding a single payment method, if we can increase the average order value for businesses, for small businesses, you can see how much value we add. Okay, so let's now look at the two different transaction models that all these payment methods really fall into. Now, they get broken out into two categories based on really how the customer interacts with these payment methods. So the first one, we refer to that as the tokenize and transact. That's a two-step model. And the second one is the order, approve, and capture model that we'll look at more in detail now. So the tokenize and transact model, the life cycle here starts with accepting the payment information within the merchant's checkout. Credit cards are a good example of this. Credit cards are a good example of a payment method that works really well in this model, because as the user is checking out, they can enter their card details, and then the merchant can immediately charge the customer with that amount when they approve the payment. As Ed mentioned, when you're using something like credit card fields, we securely collect the information the merchant never gets access to the card details. We return a short-lived one-time use token to the merchant that they can then take to their server, and then they can either create a transaction with it or they can vault it for transacting later. So let's look at an example of this transaction. So imagine in this case, the customer entered their credit card details. Now, this can also work for other payment methods that follow the same model. But the user enters their card information, and when they submit the form, PayPal and Braintree both automatically take this information and return a token to the user. In addition to that token, the one-time use token, which refers to this payment information, we also return enough information to the user, to the merchant, so that they can display this information back on the merchant's checkout flow. But we're still not returning the entire credit card number to them, because then the merchant needs to worry about managing that securely. Once they get that, they can then take it to their server, take that payment token, that nonce, to their server, and then create a transaction. In this flow, if you see, in the first step, it's like I said, the lifecycle starts with collecting payment information. The amount that is going to be charged, and none of that is specified in the first step. All of that comes when you're creating a transaction. Now, the second model, the key difference between the tokenize and transact and the order, approve, capture model is this middle step, where as a customer, from the merchant's checkout flow, I am then taken to a screen that is managed by the payment method, where I review my order before the customer can charge me for it. PayPal as a payment method is a great example for this model. Now, you may think that this adds a little bit more friction because it's one additional step in the checkout journey. But there's enough proof that this method really works well. And one of the reasons it works well is trust. When a customer clicks on a payment method like PayPal or any digital wallet, when they're taken to a screen that they're familiar with from a service that they trust, it reinforces the fact that they can transact on this website. Because very often as shoppers, we shop on websites that we have not visited earlier. So security implicitly is a huge concern to us. And again, similarly, so once the user approves the payment here, then the merchant can capture the payment. And these terms, the reason I'm referring to these terms is when you use our APIs and SDKs, you will see that both of these models are available in our APIs and SDKs. So again, let's look at an example transaction here. So in contrary to the tokenize and transact model, here the transaction lifecycle starts a little bit earlier. It starts after the user has added items to their cart, and when they click a button to start the transaction, you start by creating an order. Now, in this case, you also will provide additional information in the order so that when the user is redirected to the payment method screen, the information can be shown to the user. So in this case, you're passing the amount, and then the PayPal screen can automatically show the amount. If you pass line items and other information, that information can also be shown so that the user has complete context when they're accepting when they're approving that order. So once the user approves the order, the control goes back to the merchant, and then for that same order, they can go ahead and capture the transaction. Now I showed you this flow with PayPal as a payment method, but you can imagine how this will work for other payment methods. Typically, this is very common across digital wallets and local payment methods. Okay, so those were the two transaction models that are available. Now let's talk about how you integrate with PayPal and PayPal Complete Payments and Braintree. We're going to talk about the two integration patterns that we support. The first one is called the hybrid integration pattern, and the second is an API-only integration pattern. So the hybrid integration pattern focuses on simplicity of integrations. In this case, if you look at the diagram here, the main component in this entire integration is the client SDKs. These client SDKs help merchants eliminate a lot of the complexity in accepting payments. If you think of it, as Ed showed us, a lot of the complexities are on the client side. You need to manage pop-ups depending if like for example, if it's a digital wallet, you need to bring up the payment method screen. You need to implement all the brand guidelines for those payment methods. Different payment methods have certain subtleties that are there. All of these complexities are automatically handled within the client SDKs. Honestly, by using client SDKs is really how you can bring down the effort of integration significantly. So in this pattern on the client SDK, you can use to collect all the payment information, then you send it to the server, and then from the server, you've got two options. You can either use a server SDK or directly integrate with PayPal and Braintree APIs. So just looking at the tooling available for both PPCP and Braintree, we offer Android, iOS SDKs that you can embed into your native apps to give a much more native experience. And if you're using a website or a mobile web view, you can then use our web SDKs. Fastlane, for example, is available on the client-side integrations are available through our web SDKs. Now on the server side, PPCP offers a suite of REST APIs that those that have already integrated with PPCP should be familiar with. And we have server SDKs coming soon on the PPCP platform. On the Braintree side, we have a single GraphQL API for all operations. And in addition to that, to further reduce the integration effort for merchants, we offer server SDKs in 6 languages. These SDKs are essentially wrappers on the API. They handle some of the glue code that you would otherwise need to write. Okay, so we talked about the hybrid pattern. Now that is the more popular pattern because, as we saw, it is really simple to use. However, while that works for 90% of our merchants, and 90% is directional, you have those large merchants that have complex use cases. For them, they need flexibility. So that's why the API-only pattern is designed and built for flexibility. Typically, like I said, this is something that large enterprises use. So if you see in this pattern, there is no client SDK. The merchant is in complete control of building the client side. The only integration that they have is through the same APIs that we offer. Now these calls are made from the server side. Now one of the reasons we see large enterprises using this model is because they're often integrated with multiple payment methods. And if you saw in the previous slide, the hybrid pattern, the client SDKs are internally communicating with PayPal and Braintree. Now think of it this way. If, as an engineer, if you have to build the client side to be working with multiple payment processors and payment gateways, it's hard to use one particular SDK on the client side. So that is why essentially these large merchants, they want more control on the experience. So they kind of rebuild all the client side capabilities. And typically these merchants that are using API only patterns have large engineering teams, and they want to be able to control every pixel on the screen. With the client SDK, while it is easy to use, to keep it simple, we have to restrict the number of options available. And that often doesn't work for the largest of merchants. OK, so to summarize, we looked at the fundamental differences between the two platforms that we offer. And we also looked at the transaction models that are available depending on the payment method that you use and the integration patterns that we offer. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Ed to wrap up the session.
Thank you. Well, there's obviously a lot of tools that we provide at PayPal for developers to be able to integrate, to accept payments online. We couldn't possibly have enough time to go through all of those different integrations. And so what we want to do is, I want to spend just a moment to highlight a few of our, I think, key integrations, things that are most popular here at PayPal. Starting over here with the PayPal buttons and messages. Of course, that yellow button is the most famous button on the internet. If you are accepting payments, especially if you are accepting any wallets, you're going to want to accept PayPal as a branded instrument. And we offer that very conveniently via our client-side SDKs, the PayPal JavaScript SDK, and we enable this as part of the Braintree SDK as well. The buttons themselves, these are intended to be a convenient helper for you to be able to render those buttons on your page, sort of a drop-in for those buttons. And it does a couple cool things. It looks at the merchant eligibility. It determines whether or not a merchant is eligible for certain buttons. And it also looks at where the buyer is located to help to determine which different instruments should be rendered on the page at any given time. So that's the PayPal buttons. You'll also see over there that we offer the messages component. Messages gives you the ability to advertise for some of our credit products. That's going to be Pay Later, Pay in 4. And you can use the messages component to advertise that on product details pages, or, as is shown here, on the checkout page itself. In the middle here, we've got the hosted card fields. We spent a lot of time talking about how we use this to enable merchants to accept card payments online without having to have the burden of that PCI compliance. We take on that for you. The hosted card fields is one of our most important integration methods that we offer. Lots of merchants are using this. It's an incredibly flexible integration pattern for all of our merchants, and you probably are using it without even realizing it, on a weekly basis. And that hosted card fields ends up being the foundation of a number of other integration offerings that we have. So on the Braintree side, we also offer a drop-in component that's intended to be the easiest way to get running on a checkout site to be able to accept a variety of different card information or other payment methods. And it also serves as the foundation of Fastlane, which is obviously our most advanced and exciting integration pattern yet. This is the quickest, easiest integration that we've offered, I think, up to this point. And we are super excited to be here to help you to get onboarded into Fastlane or to get help with any of your other integration products that you have. So if you're looking for help today, if you have any questions about these different products, feel free to come find us on stage. Feel free to find any of the other folks that are in the audience that have the white shirts. You may notice that some of us have these various different wristbands on. The wristbands refer to the different platforms that we are familiar with. So feel free to come look for somebody and ask any questions that you have. If they can't answer it, we'll help you find somebody that does. And with that, thank you very much. We appreciate all of your time and your being here, and we're excited to get to know you a little bit more in person.